Before the homily, I have a comment. It's a personal comment and a personal perspective. And I'm fully aware that many of you may not agree with me, and that is okay, because that is your perspective. As a called and ordained minister of the Church of Jesus Christ, and as a veteran of more than 24 years in the Army, including service in Vietnam, what is happening in our country today relative to immigration enforcement is neither American nor Christian. It is strictly an illegal and unconstitutional program of intimidation, intended to create chaos and fear. As I said before, these activities, fatal activities in some instances, around our country, especially in Minneapolis, are un-American and un-Christian. My opinion. I fear for the lives of friends and colleagues, and I should not have to have this fear in these supposedly United States. We here are a long ways away from these activities, but not entirely separated from them. But that does not mean we are immune from their impact. Grace and peace to my friends and fellow sojourners, from God, the Creator, the Redeemer, and the Sustainer. Our vacation plans originally included plans to attend a smoldering myeloma and multiple myeloma seminar hosted by the Mayo Clinics in Orlando, Florida, yesterday. We ultimately decided not to attend that seminar and returned to the islands earlier than planned. I stopped in the office briefly on Friday, and Shannon mentioned that Father Chris had to miss several days of classes this week due to illness. I called Father Chris and told him I was back and I could take today off his plate so he could get some more rest. Hence, you have me. 3 of our readings today reference light. The same light I spoke about 3 weeks ago on January 4th. The 4th reading from 1 Corinthians speaks about divisions. Paul is concerned about how the Christians are identifying by who physically baptized them or leads them in their faith journey. Based on this reading, I suspect Paul would be absolutely mortified by the state of Christendom today. In our reading, Paul identifies 4 divisions. Yet Wikipedia establishes around 45,000 to 47,000 different Christian denominations. Wow. Paul's question then is just as important today. Has Christ been divided? All these denominations came into being for simply petty, man-made doctrinal issues. What kind of bread or liquid is used for the Eucharist? And who may receive the Eucharist? Do we use creeds? And if so, what words are in those creeds, or even in shared prayers? Now, I believe Jesus made doctrinal statements that I often refer to without calling them doctrinal statements. So anyone care to hazard a guess as to what I am referring? Kelly? No? Yes. Yes. Jesus' 2 most important commandments are Jesus' doctrinal statements. They are to love God and love your neighbor as yourself. Now that's pretty simple language, but not so easy to do in this world of ours, where the focus tends to be on ourselves. So keep trying, and then trust God to provide the necessary support. Let us now return to the light. The first thing that came to my mind about light is, what did Genesis 1 have to say about it? I mean, that's the start, right? Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 says, God created the heavens and the earth. And then Genesis chapter 1, verse 2 says, the earth was formless and empty and in darkness. Then in Genesis chapter 1, verse 3, God said, let there be light. It also says God separated the light from the darkness, and God named them. Question: does light or darkness cause division? Good question, huh? I see some shaking of heads. Kelly is down here going, oh. Okay, for the record, I do not believe light causes divisions because light illuminates. On the other hand, it is entirely possible darkness causes division. After all, darkness causes fear and lostness, which are, in my mind, breeding grounds for division. Faith and light push darkness and divisions aside. Who or what is the light? Where does the light come from? I suspect a simple answer for us and most Christians is to say, Jesus. After all, among 7 I am statements, Jesus did say, I am the light of the world. Here's the thing. Jesus never seems to give direct answers or statements about anything to anyone. Jesus mostly talked using stories and parables. Now, I've touched on this thought before, but I'm going to be more direct this time. What if Jesus is not talking in the first person, but rather in the third person when he gives these I am statements? Now, this is a deep thought. Maybe not, because I thought of it. But follow this. Not first person, but third person. And how does that come into being? Well, here it is. In Exodus chapter 3, verse 14, God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. In other words, God has claimed the name I am. So Jesus could simply be saying, God is the light of the world. Now you may be wondering how I got to this train of thought. There are 2 distinct thoughts. This didn't happen for 2 weeks in Florida. Sorry about that. There are 2 distinct thoughts running around randomly in my brain that created this train of thought here. One came from Father Chris's homily last week about raising monuments, to dead people. And the other comes from Pastor Brandon or Pastor Krimmer or Pastor Curie or someone else, I can't remember who, about worshiping Jesus. This latter idea is focused on the fact that Jesus never asks us to worship Jesus Christ, but rather Jesus asks us to follow Jesus Christ. I'm putting these thoughts out here before you simply for your consideration. I'm not telling you they are right or that you need to accept or believe them, but it is where my faith journey seems to be taking me. Is the Christian emphasis on the cross simply a monument to a dead man? Is how many Christians worship Jesus instead of God idolatrous? Is the Trinity really biblical, or is it just a man-made doctrine? When using water to model the Trinity, did anyone ever consider how water is so much a part of all of creation? When you talk about a part of us craving God, is that just our water craving more water from God? In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus is consistently and constantly speaking about the kingdom of God, or the kingdom of the heavens. Eugene Park, in his commentary on our gospel reading, tells us that Jesus refers to the kingdom of the heavens in all 5 major discourses in Matthew. Did you know there were 5 major discourses in Matthew? Yeah, I think we learned that in seminary, but I don't remember that either. But I'm going to tell you about them a little bit, very little bit. Those 5 discourses are identified as, first, the Sermon on the Mount in chapters 5 to 7. The commissioning of the disciples discourse in chapters 9 and 10. The parables discourse in chapter 13. The community discourse in chapter 18. And the eschatological discourse in chapters 24 and 25. So what does it mean to follow Jesus? To me, it means loving God and loving others without ever asking if any or either are worthy. Robert Farrar Capone has said, people always assume that the church's primary business is to teach morality, but it isn't. It's to proclaim grace, forgiveness, and the free party for all. It's to announce the reconciling relationship of God to everybody and to invite them simply to believe it and celebrate it. Notice in that quote the words, reconciling relationship. Hear then the good news. The Our Daily Bread devotional for today, I had to look at it yesterday just to see what it was, is titled, Be Like Jesus. Note, it does not say worship Jesus. I think being like Jesus is the same as following Jesus. The devotional calls it a transformative process. I often call it a journey or a sojourn. Ultimately, whatever it is for you, it should be about love and relationship with God, with all of creation, and with others. Grace and peace to you, my friends. Be like Jesus. Amen.